It's near the end of 1938, and deep in the confines of Berlin, Germany, a couple of nerds are about to discover a discovery that will change the world forever. Chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann were enjoying the traditional German pastime of bombarding uranium with neutrons in hope of something interesting to happen. After a few sauerkraut sandwiches, Hahn and Strassmann checked the results of their experiments and discovered that they had performed nuclear fission, which is the act of splitting a larger atom into smaller atoms, releasing a ton of energy in the process. Kind of like a bomb. But there's a bit of a problem. You see, this isn't just Germany, this is 1939 Germany. You know, Nazi Germany. And nuclear fission sounds like it would make a pretty effective weapon. German-American physicist and local Nazi hater Leo Szilard was worried Strassmann and Hahn's discovery would fall into the wrong hands, so he knew he needed to warn the Allied nations. So he wrote a letter to United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt that basically said, the letter was even signed by famous scientist Albert Einstein, so that Roosevelt knew to take it very seriously, which he did. With some prodding from British scientists, Roosevelt approved a program on October 9th, 1941 to assess the feasibility of an atomic bomb using uranium. So sometime later, the committee of the program came back to FDR and said, "We might be able to do it, but we need like $50 to $100 million maybe?" Roosevelt scratched his chin and contemplated moving forward, but was ultimately convinced when a bunch of very American boats were blown up by very Japanese planes. On August 13th, 1942, theory would be engineered into reality with the start of the Manhattan Project, which pushed forward the physical development of the world's first nuclear weapons. Such an ambitious project certainly needed an equally ambitious leader, and there was only one man for the job. That's right, the Manhattan Project was under the direction of none other than Leslie Groves Jr., a decorated and well-respected United States Army Corps of Engineers lieutenant general. But he also needed someone to lead the secret weapons laboratory. So here enters the star of our story, theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, a strictly conservative, Nobel Prize-winning scientific leader. Except he wasn't. To the United States government, Oppenheimer was a filthy commie sympathizer. He had never won any notable awards, nor had he led any major scientific breakthrough projects. But like a shonen anime main character, he had drive and ambition like no other, and Lieutenant General Groves knew that determination would guarantee the success of this project, so Oppenheimer got the job. Great, but now they had to actually build the lab, and what's more remote and secure for a secret base than in the middle of fuckbuck nowhere, New Mexico? Now set with a location, Oppenheimer then assembled his own Avengers squad of some of the most brilliant physicists at the time in the spring of 1943, placing himself as the Captain America of the group. To keep everyone living together harmoniously during the project, the town of Los Alamos was erected practically overnight. Now, the race was on to beat the smelly Nazis to the finish. With such a high-pressure project, it wasn't uncommon for everyone on staff to frequently worry that Germany was going to beat them to the punch. But Oppenheimer was a natural leader. He was constantly present in every meeting, discussion, and critical moment during the project, ensuring that morale was always maxed out. By July 1945, 3 bombs were successfully developed. Little Boy, a gun-type fission bomb that worked by firing one chunk of uranium into another, Fat Man, an implosion-type bomb that worked by compressing a plutonium core to critical mass, and Gadget, a Fat Man duplicate used as an initial test run. And boy was it a test. An official test site, codenamed Trinity, had been constructed 200 miles away from Los Alamos to serve as ground zero for the world's first detonation of a nuclear weapon. On July 16, 1945, Gadget was positioned up a 100-foot tall tower to be detonated. Bunkered a hop, skip, jumping away from the tower were 425 spectators, including Oppenheimer. While excited, everyone was still pretty freaking nervous. The scientists weren't exactly certain of what would happen once the bomb was detonated. Would it explode as planned? Would it fizzle out and do nothing? Or would it cause a chain reaction that would obliterate the Earth's atmosphere and allow the sun to burn humanity to a crisp? There was only one way to find out. At 5:29 a.m., Gadget was detonated and immediately exploded with the force of 25,000 tons of TNT, Almost instantly, the explosion turned the desert sand into a 1,000-foot wide glass crater, generated a shockwave that was felt over 100 miles away, and created a mushroom cloud that stretched 7.5 miles into the sky. He had done it. Oppenheimer and his team successfully created a nuclear weapon, an achievement equally exciting and horrifying. If you're familiar with historical timelines, you might realize that by July of 1945, Nazi Germany had already surrendered, with Japan being the last man standing. Once news of the successful nuclear test reached President Bro Harry Truman, he quickly used it as an open threat to Japan. On July 26, 1945, the US, Great Britain, and China issued the Potsdam Declaration, a document calling for the immediate and unconditional surrender of the Empire of Japan, lest they face prompt and utter destruction. Japan, of course, responded rather quickly, saying, so the US was all,
"You sure about that? You sure about that?"
and proceeded to deliver on the threat. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on the city of Hiroshima, Japan, a major port and military headquarters. Because it was largely untouched by bombing raids, it allowed for a clear measurement of the before and after destruction of the atomic bomb. The blast directly killed 70,000 people, with almost 90% of those deaths being innocent civilians. Despite the immense destruction, the detonation was actually determined to be extremely inefficient, fissioning only 1.7% of its total material. Japan continued to ignore the Allies' demands for surrender, essentially stating that they didn't hear no bell, but they were about to hear something a bit louder. 3 days later, on August 9th, the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki after the primary target of Kokura was unable to be seen through the clouds. The blast killed 35,000 people instantly. Truman made the tough decision to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan. But you, on the other hand, have an easy decision: to drop 1 like on this video. Truman did have several more atomic bombs lined up if Japan continued to resist, but on August 15th, 1945, Japanese Emperor Hirohito announced his intention to surrender.
そもそも帝国市民の法寧を図り、しかれとも金は自分の赴くところ、耐え難きを耐え。
World War II was over. Following the war, Oppenheimer was deemed the father of the atomic bomb and was hailed a national hero, becoming the face of nuclear energy. That is, until Truman wanted him to develop a much more deadly hydrogen bomb to use against the Soviets. Oppenheimer was like, no. To which Truman responded, "You're fired, Bob!" and immediately had Oppenheimer's security clearance revoked. After being politically blacklisted, Oppenheimer hosted scientific lectures around the world and warned others of the destruction science can have when mixed with politics. Being a heavy chain smoker, he was unsurprisingly diagnosed with throat cancer in 1965 and bit the dust just 2 years later on February 18, 1967 at the age of 62. Oppenheimer's legacy shows the true power of scientific innovation, but how terrifying it can be when weaponized. The bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima mark the only time in history that atomic weapons were used against fellow humans. And for all of our sake, let's hope that it stays that way. Or at least until I can max out my old school RuneScape account.